I work for two different solid waste districts. My name is Ham. Gillett rhymes with skillet. I do outreach in the Southern Windsor, Windham County Solid Waste District, of which Cavendish is a member town. There are 14 towns in this district. I also do outreach and sort of run the Greater Upper Valley District, which runs from Hartford up to Vermont. So my territory, outreach territory runs from Vermont, West Fairleigh, all the way down to Rockingham, and as far west as, I think, Bridgewater, Woodstock. That's probably the... and I wanted to just tag on to what Peter said. This, I handed out some of these until I ran out. I literally thought there were only going to be 3 people here. So if anybody didn't get one of these, we will make sure that you do. We can either mail you one or email you one. This is taken from the state website, and the way I found it was to Google Vermont DEC food scraps, and you'll find it. This has a lot of great information, a lot of frequently asked questions, and the best thing about it is that if you have one in front of you, in the first paragraph there's a link to a document called the Dirt on Compost, which I think is the best document and the most user-friendly document that I've seen so far. It was put together by the staff at Central Vermont Solid Waste District, which is up in the Montpelier area. They've generously made it available to everybody in the state, and so I highly recommend you, if you have access to a computer, look this up because it's fantastic. On the back, my colleague Mary O'Brien, who is actually the recycling coordinator for this district, has put together a list of where your food scrap disposal options are based on where you live. So check that out. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for the Energy Committee. And I have to put my glasses on here. I'm very briefly going to tell you, and you've probably heard this ad nauseum, but I feel it's sort of my duty to say the reason that the state passed this law. And if any of you are tearing your hair out and grumbling that you have to do this, this is just sort of a gentle reminder, big picture of why we're all attempting to do this. First is that we have one landfill left. It's up in Coventry, Vermont, which is almost in Canada. It's owned by Casella Waste. They've just applied for an expansion of like 52 acres, which has drawn a lot of opposition. Once that landfill is full, we're done. Vermont is probably not going to build another one. So we are trying to extend the life of that one landfill. And since most Americans throw away about a third of the groceries that they buy in a grocery store, when you keep that out of the landfill, you are significantly saving space in the landfill for stuff that has to go in there. One other thing is that rotting food scraps in a landfill create a lot of methane, much more than a fleet of 18-wheelers on the road. And we are obviously trying to reduce the amount of methane we create because of climate change. I once saw a bunch of carrots that had been in a landfill for 20 years, and they still look like carrots. It's a very slow process that as they rot anaerobically, and just give off all this gas. The third one, but also important, I do compost workshops with a wonderful woman named Kat Buxton, and she and I are both master composters, but she's far more experienced than I am. She tells in her presentation that the soil in the Midwest, in the farmland, there's 60 harvests left in this before all the topsoil is gone. And so there's sort of an international awakening that we really need to regenerate and rebuild the soil that has been deplenished by agriculture or whatever. So the more food scraps we can compost, the more that you can put back on your garden, the more healthy your soil is. So those are the reasons. You all know, obviously, that as of July 1st, all Vermonters were required to start sorting their food scraps. And I will be interested to know where you all are in that process. I have, and Mary both, have been getting inundated with phone calls and emails from most everybody who waited until the last minute to start composting and panicked and don't know what to do, where to get a composter and where they're supposed to take it. And so we've been very busy answering those questions. July 1st was the deadline, so theoretically we are all supposed to be keeping our food scraps out of the trash. There is an exception to that, and I'm just going to repeat it. Probably most of you know. If you are composting in your backyard, you may still continue to put your meat scraps and your bones in your trash. Your backyard compost will not get hot enough to kill the pathogens in the meat and the bones. If you don't want to put them in your trash, you may take them to your local transfer station, because any food scraps that go to your local transfer station are going to end up in a commercial composting facility with the giant windrows of food scraps turning into soil, into compost, and the pile will get at least 140 degrees, which is the minimum temperature it takes to kill pathogens. But if you don't want to go that route in your backyard composting, please feel free to continue to put your meat scraps in your trash. I want to say one thing about meat scraps. Some of you may have chickens, or your neighbors may have chickens. I highly recommend giving food scraps to chickens. Pigs as well, but pigs must not eat any meat or anything that has touched meat. This is according to the Vermont Ag Agency. If you're raising one pig for yourself, for your family, it's okay occasionally, I suppose, but if you're giving or selling that meat to anybody else, they're even so strict as to say, I worked with an elementary school that was somebody in the school or one of the parents had pigs, and they were taking all the compost, the food scraps to that farm, and basically the ag agency says, even if you're making a turkey sandwich or a hamburger with lettuce on it, if your hamburger touches that lettuce, it should not go to a pig. So they're not overly cautious, but they're being extremely cautious because there's some very nasty diseases that can run rampant in pig populations. And for some reason, pigs and humans have some sort of a similar immune system. So that's just a reminder. And before I forget, I had a woman call me from Thetford the other day, and she's ordering her third backyard composter, Soil Saver, one of these. I said, what are you doing with 3? And she said, well, I'm having a big party, an outdoor party, and I want to have enough so that everybody can put their food scraps in. And she said, it's going to be zero waste, sustainable, we're all going to be at least 6 feet apart, and we're going to use compostable tableware and utensils and cups. And I said to her, you probably know this, but most of the compostable tableware that is on the market these days will not break down in your backyard compost. And it will take a very long time for it to break down in a commercial compost system. So I'm going to be hated by all the companies that manufacture this stuff. But if there's any way that you can avoid it, avoid it. Because what happens is if you can put it in a compost pile where it won't break down, Or you can put it in with your plastic recycling, and you've just contaminated your entire load of recycling, because compostable tableware is not plastic, and it will not break, it can't be recycled. So there was a restaurant in Ludlow that couldn't keep a dishwasher, a human dishwasher, so they did away with the position. They got rid of all of their reusable ware, and they invested a lot of money in cups, plates, bowls, forks, knives, spoons, and thinking, well, this can just go to our composter, our hauler, and the hauler said, no, we can't take any of it because it won't break down. It contaminates our compost. We're trying to make organic compost. So there's this restaurant stuck with having made this huge investment. They can't put it in the recycling, and they can't put it in their compost, so it's all trash. So what I recommend to people, this is one of my pet passions, and I've tried to get several communities to start this, and certainly this time of COVID is not the time to start this. But when we have a vaccine and when this is laying low, not disappeared, I would highly recommend or urge you or suggest that you try, if you're having a party, or use reusable ware. Get just get a little stash of maybe 12 plates and 12 cups and 12 forks and knives, so that you can use them, and the same with napkins. So you're not throwing any of this stuff away. You can wash it, run it through your dishwasher, and try it again. There's two women I know in Cornish, New Hampshire, who both of their children got married in one summer. They ended up with 100-place table setting, and they built a shed, and they have all of this stuff in bins, and you can use it. Anybody can call them and go there and get as much as you want for free. All they ask is that you wash it before you return it. So it's a great idea, one of my pet projects. There you have it. All right, I'm actually going to stop talking, and I want to start hearing questions. Do you want to start with the ones that people?
Well, I've got a few.
You're going to wait.
But if anybody asks a question, if you would please repeat it, because your microphone will be picked up on the TV.
Yes.
And we don't have a microphone for people out there. So.
Thank you for that reminder. Okay. Lady in the green shirt.
Bears get into my garbage. How do I keep them from getting into the compost?
How do I keep bears out of my compost? That is probably one of the most frequently asked questions I get. A couple of things. The way I was taught to compost in my backyard is that when you look in your compost pile, you should never see any food scraps. For every one container of food scraps that you put in your compost pile, you should put 3 containers of some kind of dead brown material, whether it's dead lawn grass, straw, wood chips, sawdust, crushed up leaves, newspaper, shredded paper, what else? Anything brown. Browns are your carbons, your greens are your food scraps is your nitrogen, and I don't want to get into the science of it, but just remember 1 to 3. So my friend Kat says if you do it well, it doesn't smell. And so if you can, what she does is she builds she's got a homemade 5-bin system. She's very serious about it. But to start a pile, she makes like a nest of straw or hay, and then she puts the food scraps in, and every time she puts food in, she covers it up. And then when she puts more food in, she goes like this, she dumps more food in. But anyway, she's always covering the food from the top and from the sides. Bears can smell black oil sunflower black oil sunflower seeds from 1 mile away. And usually it's the bird food that will attract bears to your yard. Once they're there, they're going to look for other places to find food. I don't have, there is no solution. Forrest Hammond, who's a state wildlife biologist, came and talked to a bunch of us, my colleagues around the state, a couple of years ago, and he said, I hope this law fails miserably, because he's so afraid of bears and people coming into contact. And it's happening this summer, happens to be concurrent with July 1st, but bears are hungry because there's not enough food. It's been so dry. So they're coming, I mean, they're coming in droves. They're smashing composters. The only other suggestion I have that I've heard works is running a strand of electric fence around your garden or your composter, putting some peanut butter on the wire. The bear, as long as the bear touches it with, nose, lips, whatever, it'll get zapped. It's gonna hurt it, it's gonna sting it, but it's a great deterrent. And that's the best advice I can give you. Make sure that your food cannot be seen or smelled.
Yeah. Just to add to that, one of the things I do is when I add 3 buckets of brown, when I add 3 buckets of brown to the green that I've put in, I usually use chopped up leaves. And it's very simple. Every fall, I'll get a pile of dead leaves, run the mower over it a couple times, and then fill a couple of large black garbage bags with that. And then it's there for me all winter long, and usually lasts well into the spring, if not into the summer. So there's always plenty of brown for me to add to whatever compost, whatever food scraps I have. And as Sam was saying, you put it in, put the food scraps in, completely cover it, and then dump some water in. That's adequate to keep the smell down. I don't ever have any smell coming out of my composter. I've never had a problem with that.
Thank you. Yeah, let me just segue onto that for a minute, and then I'm going to take more questions. A lot of people say, what am I supposed to do in the winter? Your compost won't get hot enough in the winter to do any, or your food scraps won't get hot enough, and they're just going to pile up. But in the spring, as soon as it starts to warm up, you're going to watch your pile just go like that. But it is a really good idea, if you are going to continue to compost through the winter, to get yourself a good collection of brown material. Leaves what was the word you used? Ground up. Yeah. Unground up. Whole leaves don't work as well because they tend to pancake, and then you get anaerobic stink in your compost pile. So it's much better to run them over, put them through a leaf chopper, or run them over the lawnmower, and then hang on to them. Stalks for perennials, like in about a month, all of our perennials are sadly going to be dying, particularly daylily stalks, anything that has a hollow stem. If you can mush those up or stomp on them or hit them with a shovel, they also make excellent brown material. Okay. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Can I put wood ashes on my compost?
Can you put wood ashes on your compost? You can, but they won't do any good. Wood ashes are dead. They're not going to do anything to your compost. It's better to put wood ashes on plants or shrubs that need that material. Like I put mine on my lilac trees, but it's not going to help your compost any.
I had a bear that came,
Yeah.
and so I just sprinkled wood ash on the top to make sure there was no smell, and he didn't do that.
Okay. So as a bear deterrent, I haven't heard that, but sprinkling wood ash on your compost pile to deter bears. You put it just a thin layer? Okay. That's kind of like People ask me how to get rid of the stink or the fruit flies in their kitchen pail. And if you put a little layer of sawdust or coffee grounds sometimes, to keep the smell down, that helps. So thank you very much. That's a great idea. Other questions? Yes?
I have a few questions. So the grass clippings, I should wait until they get brown to put them into the compost?
If you put fresh grass clippings in, they're basically the equivalent of food scraps. They're nitrogen. So yes, leave them on your lawn or bag them, put them in a pile, but let them get brown.
Okay. My next question is, so right now I have like a compost bin that's just for like vegetables and like fruit or like, core. But if I'm gonna not eat all of our zucchini that we cook in, butter and salt and pepper, that's okay to throw in? That's gonna not like, I guess my question is like oil in the compost bin, or is that all okay?
Yes. You don't want to dump a gallon of frying oil but oil is okay. Eggshells are fine. I crush mine up. They never disappear, but at least they're not as big. Some people don't put meat, don't put dairy or cheese in. I don't drink that much or eat that much cheese, but I don't find that that's a problem. But yes, you can put, pretty much anything but meat and bones in.
Okay, and then my last question is, so if you were to do like the freezer method with the bones and the meat, I would assume I'm putting that in a Ziploc bag, but then bringing it to the transfer station, it's going to be frozen in the bag. And so how am I getting this frozen block? Right? Because I was reading in here that like there's certain bags you can use, but certainly not Ziploc bags. So, or am I just going to just manually like get it out?
Yes. So question was, if you put your meat scraps and bones in the freezer and you take that bag of frozen meat scraps and bones to your transfer station, how do you transfer it? That depends. It depends on your transfer station. Some transfer stations, depending on where the food scraps are going to end up, at what facility they're going to end up, they may or may not accept plastic bags. Green bio bags, if your transfer station accepts food scraps in bags, chances are it's going to be in a green bio bag. And if they don't, if you're going to bring it in a Ziploc bag, then I would say probably you're going to have to just rip open the Ziploc bag and dump just the food scraps in. You may destroy your Ziploc bag. You may be able to use it again. But does that answer your question? Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Anybody else? In the back.
I have a composter like the one up there. Does that have to be in the sunshine, or could it be in the garage? Could it be under a tree? Does it matter?
It does not. The question is, do you have to put a composter in the sun? The answer is no. The heat, if you're doing your compost right, the heat is coming from inside the pile. It doesn't need sun. My friend Kat, who I'm going to keep referring to, her compost bins are in the shade under trees. I've had a couple of people ask me about putting a composter in the garage. I guess that's okay as long as you're composting successfully. And you might attract, if there's access in your garage for mice or voles or chipmunks, you might get them in there. But no, it does not have to be in the sun. And you also do not want to put it under the eaves of your house, because in the summer, when the rain comes off, it can get too wet. In the winter, the snow is going to come off if we ever get snow again, and either bury or crush your composter. So you want to, you have to sort of compromise between, you don't want to put it out in the back 40 where you don't want to shovel it a path to in the winter, but you also don't want to have it, you put it right up close to your house, but just don't put it under the eaves. Yeah.
If I might, we talk about bears and critters getting into our compost, but don't forget the reason why the aerobic digesting goes on is because there are an abundance of insects and microbes in that compost. So there's a lot going on in there. I don't think I'd want to have it inside, but it's just me.
Yeah, thank you, that's true. I mean, if you're putting it on a cement pad, there are a lot of creatures, thousands, millions of them coming up into your compost if you're feeding them correctly, that they're going to be coming from underneath. So that is a good point. I think out of desperation, you might try it, but that would be a last resort for me. Yeah.
My question concerns the winter. When it stops working and you're building up a lot more compost than that composter can hold, what are you supposed to do from November till March?
I have 3 of those, and I'm just myself, so I don't generate a whole lot. But I'm going to get to your question. What I do is I start a new pile in the spring when everything's warming up, and I use it right up through to November when things start to freeze. Then I top it off and I leave it, and I start another one for the winter. And by next May, the frozen stuff has decomposed enough, and I can actually use that on my garden. There's no really good answer to that question. If you're running out of space, are you planning to use one of these, or are you going to build, or have you built something? Use one of these. I would suggest buying 2. I'm not trying to hustle you. These are a pretty good deal at 50. They're about 100 on anywhere between 85 and 100 online. Or if you're clever and handy, if you want to try building something out of chicken wire and old 2x4s, that just gives you another option. If you don't want to do that, and I could be shot for saying this, but there are people who for various reasons are just not able to compost, period. Or certainly if they're some elderly people who can barely get outside anyway in the winter, the last thing they're going to do is compost. Then I have told several people to put it in the trash.
Just my experience, just last year, I have this composter. I have a couple, but this is what I've been using. And I started using it at the end of the summer, mid-fall, and by March, late March, when things started to thaw, it was pretty full, but it never filled up. And now it's down to about half. And I keep feeding it every week, and it's still only about half. So these will take a lot of material. The other thing that, if you really have a lot, get a couple of pallets and set up a composter. You can do it with 5 pallets. You can set up 2 composters next to each other. It has a lot of advantages. Volume is one. Another is that you can get a shovel in there real easy and turn it over. So you can build it up during the winter and get a heck of a big pile. And then as soon as it thaws in the spring, you can turn it over very easily with a shovel. Also, as Ham said, chicken wire, in a couple of 2x4s you can make a pretty big composter. And one of the handouts I have up here does have some examples, including doing it with cement blocks, which
Oh, yeah.
I can't imagine, but, you know,
If you Google build your own composter, you'll be overwhelmed with choices. And I would add to Peter, if you happen to build one out of pallets, they can just be wired together or tied together. Also, dogs and compost, not a good combination. Dogs can die from eating food out of your compost. Particularly, there are certain molds that grow on certain foods like bananas, and I have heard of a dog dying from getting into somebody's compost pile. So I would recommend, I take that back, chicken wire is one option, but even better is like 1/4-inch hardware cloth, which is very stiff screening. And you could put, if you're building your own, I would suggest that because nothing can get in there. And also, I don't do this, but some people buy a piece of hardware cloth a little bigger than one of these, and they set it on the ground, and then they set the composter on top of it because there's no bottom to this. I like the fact that there's no bottom, and this is getting back to your question about winter composting. I have voles and little mice and things who live in my yard, and they have a smorgasbord all winter long. I don't care whether they eat the stuff or not, and they help keep the pile down low. They just come up underneath, and
that's the ultimate recycling.
it is. For the purposes of this law, the law wants you not to put it in the landfill. Whatever you do with it to keep it out of the landfill is fine. Somebody just before you, somebody said somebody over here have a question? Yeah, go ahead.
I've got a compost tumbler, the 37-gallon one, that I got out of Home Depot, which is great.
Yep.
It works beautiful. The only problem is I can't seem to start the compost. It's too cold. So I read online that you can actually, if you add some compressed equine horse pellets, they're pine bedding. You add that to it, supposedly it'll start getting hot. Is that true, or?
Never heard of that before, but anything's worth a try. All right, so you basically in your tumbler you've got a bunch of rotten food, right?
Probably more browns.
More browns.
Yeah. You want, like you said, 3-to-1 ratio, right? Yeah.
Your compost, the stuff, the material in your tumbler might be too dry.
I checked it. It seems to be moist enough.
Okay. That's where I would go first, is adding a little moisture to it, or back off a little bit on the browns, and you're tumbling it, right?
Yes.
Try the horse pellets, and let me know.
It also said, one other place that I read said, try bone meal. I don't know why, but that's what it said. That would usually start it
Yep.
off. That compost.
Okay. I haven't heard that either, but as I say, I'm not an expert. So, if you feel like fiddling around with it, try it and see. And if it works, let the world know.
I got one other question.
Yeah.
How come they don't mandate towns to have a tumbler or something so they can make their own compost? Because that'd be beneficial to the town. If they had a composter there and made their own compost, I think Woodstock does that, don't they? I think they
Partially, yes.
actually, yeah.
But
Then people could come in and get compost for, it's a win-win situation.
Thank you for bringing that up, and I will get to you in a sec. You would think that a community compost pile would be the answer to everybody's problems. And in theory, it is, but I've worked with several towns who have tried to do that, And there are a couple of issues. One is finding a site for it that's not next to, people's houses. Another one is monitoring it. You can't really have it open 24/7 because people are going to dump all manner of stuff in it. I was just talking to a hauler last weekend who's using bags. I try not to get off topic. He's using compostable bags. He sells them to his customer. The customer brings the food scraps. And he's opening them all up just to see what's inside. He's doing a little study. And there was a smashed jar of salsa, lid, broken glass, and salsa. So monitoring it is very difficult. You really have to have somebody, you have to have it open certain hours and have somebody there saying, can't put that in, can't put that in. And also, believe it or not, somebody just called me from Heartland today and said, where do I get brown material? And I said, well, talk to your town highway crew. They must mow the library lawn or the soccer field or whatever. And you've got a community garden. How about that? So she's going to try that. But it's a great idea. And I think that as time goes on and more people either get frustrated with doing it in their backyard, that you're going to see community composting pop up, but it's those are the three big hurdles. Somebody's got to manage it, and it's liable to be likely to be volunteers. So you've got to organize the volunteers, and everybody has to know how much brown to add and how much green to add. And I think it's going to happen.
Our dump has all the browns in one spot, leaves, branches, all that stuff. So if I need brown material, I just go to the dump,
Yeah.
fill up a bag, and I'm fine.
Perfect. That's perfect. Yeah.
So, how do you get rid of that if you don't have a garden, or you have a garden this big and you have a compost that full? And you have dogs, so you don't want to dump it in your backyard.
Yeah. You can, I'm assuming that you're assuming that if you compost right and you actually you end up with compost and you don't end up with a bunch of food scraps, you can dump it, you can put it on your lawn, you can put it under trees, you can put it in the woods, you can give it to your neighbor if somebody has a garden and wants it. But your big concern is the dogs. Yeah. If it works for you, if you're successful, which you will be, you won't have any food scraps in there that will harm a dog. You will have a bunch of compost and dirt. If that doesn't happen, you said you have a little garden. Yep. Well, it might get bigger. Who knows? But I would. That's what I would say to you. You could. You have any woods around your house, or? It's another option is to take it, dump it in the woods and dump leaves and stuff on top of it, and put a little. Get some chicken wire from the dump and just put a little. Okay. Okay. Now that's a good question. And
Try the chicken wire for composting. Doesn't work at my house.
oh, all right. Yeah, big dogs, little dogs.
3 big dogs.
Okay. Yeah. Electric fence. I'm sorry I don't have a perfect answer for you, but I would say give it a try, see how this stuff turns out, and it shouldn't be attractive to dogs once it's gone past being food scraps. And let me just say that I am happy to take emails or calls from you if you get in the middle of something and you're really frustrated and PO'd and you need another solution. That's part of my job. So If you call me in 6 months and say, this is a miserable failure, I'm happy to help you try to figure out a solution. Okay.
What's your email?
We will make that available. My email is Gillett, at, and here's a bunch of initials, S as in Sam, W, C, R, P as in Peter, C.org. swcrpc.org. And my colleague Mary is M. O'Brien, and the rest is the same. O'Brien with an E. Other questions? Lady in the green shirt.
Well, a couple of things. I was told to put worms and lime in my composter, and lime seems to work fine. I had a compost. What, I found animals got into the bottom of that too much. They like opened the doors, so I switched to a tumbler. What do you think? Is there advantage to one over the other?
A tumbler, the advantage to a tumbler over a soil saver like this. I know a lot more people who do this, not necessarily this kind. I mean, I've sold hundreds of these, but I know a lot more people who use this type or a homemade one than a tumbler because, and I don't know, sir, if you've had this problem, but a lot of people, I've talked to a number of people who get frustrated because the tumbler the stuff freezes in the winter and it doesn't tumble. What was the issue with the tumbler? You put lime in it?
Oh, someone in the nursery told me I should put lime and worms in it, and mine works fine. I was answering this question, he was having a problem with his tumbler.
Oh, okay. Great. Well, there's another answer for you. Thank you. Yeah.
One more. When it says no meat, does that count, or does like chicken broth or like bone broth, is that considered meat because of the proteins in it? Like, I'm just trying to do it right.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking possibly just not compost in the winter, maybe just bring it.
Yep.
So
I would try to avoid putting anything meat related. I mean, half a cup or something like that, I don't think it's going to be a problem. That's the same with, if you've got a couple of little pieces of gristle or something on your plate after you've eaten your steak. I don't think that's going to be an issue, but I would try to avoid that. Yeah.
And paper products, is there a general rule for most paper can be composted?
Most paper, even the newspaper print and most magazines now are printed with soy ink. So in that regard, either one is fine. Shiny, glossy tends not to absorb as well. So I would be inclined to put newspaper in or like shredded office paper. That's probably better, yep. Yes?
Does that newspaper have to be shredded as well, or do you just take a chunk and throw it in? How do you do that?
Does the newspaper or paper have to be shredded? It will disappear and do its job a lot faster if it's shredded. Cardboard, by the way, also works, but you don't want to put you don't put a bunch of it, because the same thing is going to happen as if you dump a bunch of leaves in. You're just going to get all this air under here, and the point you want air circulating through your composter. So even if you don't have a shredder, even if you can tear it up a little bit, that will be better than putting just a lot of full sheets in. Anybody else? Yes?
Yeah, I just got a new countertop composter for inside, and it works fine, except all the fruit flies like it, they all sit on top of it. Is there any reason to put in that or discourage?
I'm sorry, I'm just going to ask you to, have you ask me that again. Yes.
I just got a kitchen, compost is small enough for the countertop. And it's looking great, but the fruit flies love being on top of it,
Oh.
on the cover.
Does it have a carbon, I'll answer that from over here. The question was fruit flies on top of your kitchen pail. Does your kitchen pail have a carbon filter on the top?
It has a cover, but the cover has
Okay. Some composters have underneath the cover, there's a actual carbon filter, a black filter, which would help. I would try, I think there's something in here, in fact. Hold on. There's something in here about,
There's this
oh, what if fruit flies fly around my kitchen container? Whether you compost or not, fruit flies appear in the summer. To make a fly trap, pour a splash of sweet liquid like red wine vinegar or old wine in a jar. Add a couple drops of dish soap. Make a funnel with a piece of paper. Put it in top of the in the top of the jar, open jar. Fruit flies will go down in. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can get those things to go in the lid. You can order those carbon things online, the charcoal thing.
Yeah, so I have one of those. It's 1.3 gallon, but it's got the charcoal filter and
It
all
just,
that.
it just
problem.
stuck right into the lid.
So,
And it makes it so it doesn't smell too. It's not a kitchen jar.
so what you're saying is that you could get a piece of, and it will fit basically any compost, any.
Yeah, I mean, same size as yours. and
Yeah, there's
it's
different
just-
sizes. You can get them like 6 3/4 of an inch.
Okay.
One's 8, a little over 8 inches.
Great.
But once you put that in there, you can add all your compost all week, have it in there, no smell, no nothing.
So the suggestion was, for another suggestion for fruit flies is to go online and buy, they make different sized carbon charcoal filters that you can stick in the underside of your lid, and it's very helpful. Thank you for that. Yeah, hang on one sec. We do sell something called a Sure Close kitchen pail. They're $5, and we sell a lot of them, and they don't have a charcoal filter, but they have little holes in them. So I imagine you could put a charcoal filter in it. Okay. They're in there somewhere. You had a question.
Can you wash those filters?
You can wash them, right?
No,
No.
I wash mine and it shrinks.
Well, you don't put it in the dryer, sir.
No, just I rinsed it under the sink
And it,
and it shrunk.
I mean, I've been using it for a while, and it starts to get a little gross where the food side
Yeah.
would be, and that's when I changed it.
Yeah.
And I think I've only changed it once in probably this month.
Well, I tried washing it.
I didn't try doing that, I was like, "Ooh, that's gross." That was-
I was thinking, yeah, sure, you can put it in your dishwasher. Of course, I've never tried that, but no. Okay, no on that one. Any other questions? Yes.
If you consider the finished product more than food scraps, getting in food scraps, if you consider the finished product, are there any things that you should not put into the compost? And I'm thinking like, for instance, pine saps, chicken manure, whatever else, are there things you should not do?
So the question is, are there things that shouldn't go in your compost pile other than meat scraps and bones? Pine needles, not a whole truckload of them, but they make a very good carbon material, brown. What was another one you mentioned?
I was thinking like pine sawdust, I have a lot of pine sap.
I've never had that question before. I think probably, again, putting some in it. Undesirables. Okay, thank you. Bones, butter, charcoal, cheese, chicken, diseased plants, dog and cat feces, fish, lard, lime, magazines, margarine, mayonnaise, it's alphabetical in case you didn't notice, meat of any kind, milk, oils, peanut butter, pressure-treated wood, sour cream, vacuum bags and dust, and yogurt. So I think that moderation. Chicken manure is great for compost, as is horse manure out of it, like a manure pile. And what I understand is that horse manure is better for a compost pile than cow manure, because horses, by nature, their poop tends to be more solid and it breaks down, and there's more bedding. Percentage of bedding to horse poop there's quite a lot of carbon in the bedding. So horse manure from a horse pile is pretty good. Again, you probably want to let it age for a year. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay. Yep. Anybody else? Yes.
What's other sources to buy those green bags? Say for the kitchen containers? Where would I find those?
The bio bags?
Yes.
What is the source for bio bags? You can get them online, and I'm discovering that since July 1st, there are a number of hardware stores and grocery stores that are carrying them. But I would suggest getting the bio bags only because I've heard that others, they've done tests on other ones and they don't break down as quickly as bio bags do. Do any of you shop in a co-op or in your grocery store? Is anybody using, like for produce bags, they're green, and I think they might be bio bags. Anyway, I try not to use plastic bags, but I have gotten several since I haven't been able to bring my own, and I'm just wondering if those they are truly biodegradable. I'm wondering if any of you bring them home with some broccoli in it or something, if you could put your food scraps in that, if you are taking your food scraps to a place that will accept a bag. Sort of a convoluted sentence, but I'm just wondering out loud if that. But I would go with bio bags if you can. I mentioned earlier that Patrick and I did a Zoom presentation back in April. And if you don't want to write this down, it's on the Okemo Valley TV. It's still on your website.
And YouTube, yeah.
And YouTube. And on Okemo Valley TV, it's called Virtual Composting Workshop. And I'm not sure what you Google for if you go on YouTube.
It's on our channel. So if you just went to Okemo Valley TV, and then it's just when you're in there, you can just type in composting and it'll show up. As will this one, as of tomorrow.
And this is going to be on as well. So
unfortunately, the stream.
Any more questions? You can always email me. I gave you that. You can call me. My phone number is our office is in Escutney. My phone number is 674-4474, and Mary O'Brien's is 674-9235.